Hello and welcome to a brief presentation on protests and policing in America today. I'm Hassan Abbas, Distinguished Professor of International Relations at the Near East South Asia Center for Strategic Studies at the National Defense University in Washington, D.C. As the topic explains, and we are all watching on our headlines, this is about a sensitive issue that we are witnessing in the shape of widespread protests across the United States in the aftermath of the brutal death of George Floyd, an African American man, at the hands of an unprofessional police officer. Protests in principle are a sign of a healthy society. However, in this case, it is more than that. It is not merely about politics or human rights. It is an issue of justice and human dignity. Police institutions across the world and in the United States are facing an uphill task in the face of COVID-19 challenge. So police is already stressed out for a different reason. However, this issue that has led to these protests is a reflection of how people are feeling angry, frustrated, and disappointed in how police is quite regularly now reacting to certain challenging situations. And unfortunately, these challenging situations quite often are in relation to police relationship with minority communities, whether it is African American community or other communities. There are a variety of viewpoints on this issue. Some people believe it is a systematic challenge. It is a reflection of institutional issues. Others believe that no, this is a random subject, or this is not reflection of any entrenched bias. We would like to discuss this issue in a dispassionate fashion, hopefully in an educational context. The focus of this brief presentation is to draw some lessons for a broader audience in the United States and outside in terms of how to understand these kind of protests and public grievances and how to tackle these challenges. And I will frame my narrative through 5 basic points. And these points will try to explain the dynamic involved and also what is to be done about it. So let's begin with the first point. The first and foremost, I think it is very clear that a crisis can very quickly convert into a chaotic situation if people somehow start to lose hope in the rule of law system. And the question here is how to nurture that hope and build confidence in community so that they don't lose hope in the whole institution just because of some events, as regular or as systematic as they may appear. And the idea of community policing becomes very relevant here. The idea of community policing is about building relationships between police and the civilians, ordinary citizens. It is about serving people. It is about providing security. It is about ensuring that ordinary people do not feel abandoned or helpless in the face of insecurity. And community policing is about de-escalation. It is about conflict resolution. It is about supporting the distressed. So a response to the challenge that we face today, as emotional as it is, first and foremost, lies in enhancing the community policing norms across United States. And this is not a new idea to United States. It in fact started from Los Angeles Police, then NYPD, and many other police institutions across United States practiced it. So we need to revise the lessons from community policing first and foremost. Secondly, peaceful protests, we must acknowledge and understand, are a pillar of democracy. It is about freedom of speech. It is about freedom of expression. It is about freedom of assembly. So inherently, there's nothing wrong with it at all, because these rights are given to the people by the Constitution. It is not nobody's personal gift to the people that somebody allows ordinary folks to come on the street and protest. These protests are about demanding accountability, and that accountability again is a central pillar of how democracy functions. We have witnessed across the world, from Middle East, South Asia, in Europe, even in United States as well, that whenever there is excessive use of force to stop protests, it always backfires. So that lesson, as simple as it may appear or sound, should be internalized. Excessive use of force is always bad. It never resolves issues. Number three, we must remember and revise, for those of you who understand these issues and those who are practitioners, especially from law enforcement background and security background, that the fundamental principles of policing are very clear. And I refer to Sir Robert Peel, whose ideas as father of modern policing are very relevant today. For instance, he had argued that winning public approval requires hard work building of reputation. It is about enforcing laws impartially. It is about hiring officers who understand communities. And force should be used only as a last resort. The role of policing is not a role in a battlefield. For police, the ordinary citizens are to be respected and given hope that they can resolve their issues or any form of challenges within the umbrella and framework of law. Police cannot act as a judge and jury. The role of police is to collect data, to establish law and order in a collaborative fashion. The second important point from Sir Robert Peel that I want to mention is that force can be only used when persuasion, advice, and warning are not working. And even then, only in a limited fashion. Because use of force is also a certain discretionary authority which has to be performed under a rule of law setting. The fourth point relevant here, the fourth major lesson is, as I would frame it in the context of a book by a British judge, Tom Bingham, his book on rule of law, an amazing book, which explains 8 principles of rule of law. As again, as basic as it may sound, these are worth looking into. I'll mention only 2. The most important one is about equality before law. Everyone has equal access to law. And secondly, what I just mentioned, the discretionary powers and authorities given to police should be used in a reasonable fashion. And they have to be held accountable if there is excessive use of force. Last but not the least, my 5th point is about this freedom of speech and this freedom of assembly cannot be construed as a freedom to create chaos. However, we know for a fact that whenever there are protests, there are criminal elements who we are witnessing in the shape of those who want to loot and make use of such crisis and vacuum, that those elements have to be tackled by law enforcement and by society at large. The people who are grieving or the ordinary people who are protesting cannot be held accountable or cannot be held responsible to manage crime fighting. Crime fighting is the role of society as a whole, but it's the responsibility of the state. That demarcation of responsibility in a crisis situation has to be kept in mind. Let's hope that we will see institutional reforms in police to deal with such situations in an adequate fashion. Let's hope that justice will prevail. And if history is any hint or any proof or any evidence, we know that in many such instances, historically speaking, these were tackled effectively by a democratic order and in a democratic manner. And the future should not be any different. It is also worth pointing out that a militarized police is not the answer. Community policing, collaborative policing, building of relationships, building of trust is the answer. Racial harmony and justice requires equality before law, as I've mentioned. This is the only pathway, or this is the only direction which can lead us to peaceful coexistence. Let's join hands to pursue this path. Thank you very much.